for coming.
Here we
Awesome.
go. Well, Ian,
Yeah.
let me give a little introduction and stuff to you, man. Ian is chopping at the bit. He is ready to go, and I see Kris over there. They're excited about this. They've been hyped up. They saw the cartoon caricature I put together of them to promote this, and they've been excited ever since they saw that. I know. Welcome to Neighboring 101. This is actually session number 69. Been at this for a while. And this is where we talk with leaders and those in the neighboring movement all across the United States, and we discover ways that organizations and individuals can use the art and skill of neighboring as part of community and personal development. So thank you for being on here and learning with us today. Our special guest, well, our special guest, plural, actually, um, are already online today. The program is titled Neighboring Movement and Community Connectors. And our guests are Ian Campbell and Kris Swanson. Both Ian and Kris are key leaders in the Neighboring Movement, which is a grassroots organization based in Wichita, Kansas. That organization is dedicated to revitalizing communities through simple yet transformative practice of getting to know your neighbors. I know they are very proficient and advocates for the asset-based community development model as well. They are passionate advocates for neighboring. Ian and Kris combine their backgrounds in community development, storytelling, and faith-based service to inspire deeper human connections. They do workshops and podcasts and local initiatives, and all of this they combine together to help individuals and organizations rediscover the power of relationships to create more connected and compassionate neighborhoods. They do a lot, which is what you would expect from any organization called the Neighboring Movement. That's what they are. Guys, welcome aboard. I look forward to hearing from you today and learning more as we go.
Ah, so good to be with you all. Yeah. I'll just add, like, in terms of the name, we only named ourselves that because we saw this call right here, like this group of people all across the world that were already doing this thing. And so we were just wanting to put a name on, like, this is the movement we're seeing around the world. So yeah, so we don't name ourselves that to think we own it. Like, we're just trying to pay homage to this great thing that's happening. So, and I think this call is testament to that. But yeah, thanks for giving us the shout out there, David. So good to be with you all. I hope everyone can hear me all right today. I'm in my favorite coffee shop because I just got off my work shift here. So I was jumping right on the Zoom. So hopefully you can hear me all right, but it's so good to be with you. I worked at the Neighboring Movement for almost 8 years now, shortly after I graduated high school. So it's something that I am deeply in love with and has changed my life in so many ways. And so I'm always super happy to get to share about the work with you all. I'm born and raised in Wichita. And so from here, and yeah, just so excited to be here. But Ian, you introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks, Kris. And thank you, David, for the awesome introduction. It's just, yeah, it's such an honor to be on here with you as someone who has just really been an absolutely pioneering force and very prolific in this neighboring world. So seriously, thank you for having us. I am Ian Campbell, and I'm the faith-based program director at the Neighboring Movement. Been here a couple of years now, and just this is such I'm really privileged to do this job, to get to spend so much of my day talking to people about my favorite thing, which is neighboring and what it means to go out and get to know and love one's immediate literal neighbors. So yeah, that's just the honor of my working life. And yeah, I mean, not much left to add, I guess, that other than just again, thank you for having us, and excited to share a little bit about what we do.
Excellent. You have co-host power if you have that sheet that you want to bring up, or if you need me to, I can either one, or however you'd like to do the first minutes of the introduction. And as you be sure and listen up here, because we're going to have ample time for questions and answer. And I'd love to see you make Ian and Kris sweat and put them on the table and really pick their brains here, because it's a good opportunity for that.
and a good group of people to do it. I've see some familiar faces for sure. So I'll just say that that's really what we want to do today as much as possible. Just make this a really conversational call. So we're gonna skip a PowerPoint, but we did think that if we could go through this little, we call it a one pager, but it's definitely not one page. We'll cover a few key program areas, and then let y'all open it up for questions, comments, and love to hear a lot from y'all about what kind of neighboring work y'all are doing as well. Can everybody see the screen okay?
I believe you're good. I believe it's coming through.
Yep.
Sweet. Well, I'll pass it over to Kris.
Yeah, we wanted to start before we jump into some of the actual like meat of the work and the programs that we have. We wanted to start by at least telling a little bit of the story of the neighboring movement, which I think is really telling for the work. So we again are based here in the South Central neighborhood of Wichita, Kansas. Neighbors call it SOCI for short, since South Central is a little bit of a sterile kind of mouthful of a name. But basically, the origin story is just it was two couples that wanted to be intentional about kind of being in community in a different way. They wanted to start an intentional community with one another, and so they moved into the neighborhood. And we're in a neighborhood in Wichita that kind of gets a bad reputation. We have South Broadway is the major thoroughfare that bisects our neighborhood, and it's known for the hourly motels that are associated with lots of prostitution and drug activity. And we have a lot of used car lots, just different things that people would see our neighborhood and say like, oh, South Broadway, you don't want to hang out there. And so I think even our co-founders would say that they moved into the neighborhood with a little bit of like a kind of colonial mindset, in terms of they were coming from backgrounds where they were like, we just want to live in a different setting than we've been in, and what can we kind of bring to this community and this neighborhood that is a little bit maligned in Wichita. But what they discovered when they got there was that there was community that was alive and well and thriving, and without them even being there. And they quickly realized like, oh, we have so much to learn from the people here in the neighborhood. It was things like an 80-year-old neighbor that lived across the street from one of the couples, that he had a hard time like getting out and taking his trash in the mornings, but the neighbor across the street would take his trash out to the curb for him. And every time that neighbor made food, he would double his recipes, and everyone on the street would just have plastic containers of food show up on their doorstep.
Oh,
Kris was talking too fast for his Zoom connection.
that's right.
It couldn't keep up with him.
I can fill in. So I think where Kris was going was that the yeah, they were just kind of observing this awesome hospitality, these relationships, all of this, just kind of organic and intentional neighboring that was happening already here. And I think the founders of the neighboring movement originally had something like the idea of creating a social service center or some place to kind of pour in resources. And what they actually discovered was that instead of doing that, they're just going to watch and see what's already here. And somebody pointed out along the way that that's very aligned with the asset-based community development paradigm, which is really like the main framework of our work. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And so we started, or the founders started, just getting mentorship from John McKnight and others in the ABCD world, and just saying, how can we discover what's already present here in the neighborhood, and then can we just step into a role where we are connectors? We take what we discover through intentional conversations with neighbors and just be in a space where we can introduce neighbors to one another. And these individuals, our co-founders, just are really good naturally at connecting. And then I think they had to kind of work to nurture that skill. But in the process, they found neighbors who, for instance, would, neighbors who have like one story that really sticks out is a neighbor that had a driver's license and no car, and a neighbor who had a car and no driver's license. We kind of live in a little bit of a food desert, and so they were able to connect those two neighbors, and then those neighbors were able to go run errands together. They walking groups have started. Just a lot of initiatives started in those early days that continues to this day, and then they finally had a name for that through the asset-based community development paradigm. And so they were also as United Methodist pastors. It was United Methodist pastors and spouses. They started they started kind of presenting some things in their churches about what they were doing. And then other churches started to say, hey, will you put together some sort of program and present it at my church? And so the faith-based component became really big shortly after. And I think it ended up where the first big program outside the neighborhood was called the Good Neighbor Experiment. And they would go around to churches, basically using, like, the neighborhood became a hub of experimentation, and then they would share that and empower churches to take that into their communities. And later, a really vibrant secular program grew, and we could talk more about the programs here in a little bit, but it all kind of started right here in the neighborhood. And so we're still very involved in neighborhood work, and that is Kris's specialty as a immediate neighbor of the neighboring movement, as well as being our longest tenured non-founding member. So I don't know if Kris made it back into the Zoom. Yeah, I don't see him yet. So I guess I can kind of move on by talking a little bit about our mission. I'll give a brief kind of overview of the mission of the neighboring movement. I'm going to skip most of the why neighboring stuff because I know that a lot of you kind of live and breathe this neighboring work, but we can always get into that through questions or otherwise. We see ourselves as dismantling a culture of scarcity. That's the culture that we are running up against. And we are nurturing a culture of neighboring. And we define that through our core values of joy, relationship, and abundance. Those are the key ingredients of neighboring that we see. So joy is just living authentically according to our values and from our gifts. Relationship we define as giving and receiving care, and abundance is discovering, connecting, and mobilizing the gifts of neighbors. And so that ABCD approach that starts with gifts, that leans into, that values so heavily the stories that are already present in communities, the values that the individuals and communities have, and the informal ways that neighbors exchange care with one another. The ABCD lens kind of put a framework around that for us. And so that's what we do. We're just doing a lot of work practicing this in the neighborhood of South Central and here in Wichita, SoCi. And then we are kind of taking what we learn, trying to connect with as many other people as possible doing this work, and sharing this in faith communities with local community organizers and government officials, business leaders, you name it. We believe that this paradigm of ABCD and then these practices of neighboring are incredibly transformative. So I'll check in with Kris. I think he came back in.
Yeah, I'm here. Can everyone hear me all right? See me all right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I do apologize, y'all. We're on the phone now. The 2012 MacBook Pro is really struggling with the cafe Wi-Fi. So
well, it's okay. I just took us through the history a little bit.
Amazing.
That up, and then talked about the mission and values. So if you want to kind of get us into some of the program work, I think that could be a good start, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian. That's perfect. Yeah. So Ian's scrolling down here to kind of start talking about some of our programs, one of the main things we are doing at this point is what we call the Community Animator Network. Sometimes people hear that and they're like, oh, so you're into like, you know, you have people that work for like Disney or something, like you're making cartoons. And we're like, no, and I think you all understand this. A lot of you are people that totally also think about the word animation as a different thing. And by animating, we mean helping kind of bring forth and enliven and kind of bring out these kind of connecting characteristics of folks in neighborhoods and kind of just enlivening them to be good neighbors. And so that's what the Community Animator Network is all about. Essentially, we hire organizers right now just across the state of Kansas because that's what we have had funding for. But we hire organizers. So if you're anywhere in the state of Kansas, you can do this program. And we train people in what Ian has referred to, I'm sure, our kind of take on asset-based community development and what we call neighboring and encouraging folks to get to know their actual literal neighbors. So they walk through a cohort model with that. They do it with other folks who are also across the state. And the cool, unique thing about this program is instead of paying to be in it, we actually pay people to participate in it, which I think is such a cool thing. That's one of the ways that we want to try to incentivize this work. We know people are busy these days. We know money can be tight sometimes. And so this is one of our ways that we try to put equity back in communities is by saying, no, it's worth it to pay people to do this good connecting work and getting to know their neighbors. This is one of the things that we think is really going to change the world. And so we want to incentivize that as much as we can. So yeah, it's really cool. We pay people, they do this whole cohort model, and it all leads up to them hosting a gathering with their neighbors. And then actually, once they finish that first phase, they're eligible to do a second phase, which is a longer term relationship with us, where they're paid long term to kind of continue doing some sort of project that they've discovered based off the gifts of their neighbors. So it can look different. We've had people do everything from starting nonprofits around some of this sort of work to doing like multicultural bazaars, big neighborhood like events. Like we have a neighbor in our neighborhood that hosts monthly events at one of our outdoor spaces and parks. And so we just try and seed some of that good work. So yeah, so that's the Community Animator Network in a nutshell. And Ian should talk about faith-based because that's his jam.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we talk about it as we actually we had that original program I talked about, the Good Neighbor Experiment, that was this big, long cohort that brought the whole church kind of into neighboring as a big initiative of the church for at various times, 9 months, 6 months. But what we've leaned into now is we're actually taking that Community Animator Network model, and we're doing it with people of faith and congregations. And we often talk about it. It's like there's the faith-based animator network. It's basically CAN with Jesus. Like we really have we've really copied and pasted so much, but it's kind of taking on a life of its own too in a really beautiful way. And really the core of both of those programs, or at least my favorite part, is this classic ABCD tool called a learning conversation or a listening conversation, or what someone in our faith-based world called holy listening conversations. It's just this and he called it that because I think what we really have realized is that everybody is gifted. Like absolutely, you take any person and you ask them the right questions, you will discover a treasure trove of gifts. And we believe that wholeheartedly, and that all neighborhoods have just this abundance of gifts. But also a lot of people, they'll tell us, like, if you just ask, what are your gifts? A lot of times people say, I don't have anything to offer, they'll say, I'm stupid. I mean, they'll really denigrate themselves. And a lot of times in communities that have been historically marginalized, of course, like they've been taught or they've been labeled so much that this denigration really becomes a big part of it. And so just by asking the right questions and getting to sit with people and have them tell our animators these stories, just these one-on-one neighbor conversations, they really become sacred. It's very few of us will ever get somebody sitting down asking us to tell big chunks of our maybe our life story, or at least reveal our values or reveal the things that we are passionate about and that give us life. very few of us will ever get the chance to do that in such an intentional way. And so when you can do that, it's really transformative. And then we have our animators take those GIFs and plot them up on an asset map, this creative visualization of these GIFs for that can then be, I think of like the cork board with the strings that that you see on TV shows, but like where you can really just look and see, okay, who do we introduce to who, and what can happen from there? What kind of transformative action can happen just by introducing one person to another based on these stories that we've heard? So yeah, and we get to do that kind of through the lens of faith. And we also read John McKnight and Cormac Russell's book, The Connected Community, which has just been really, I would recommend it to anybody. Just such a good book. So that's that. And then we touched a little bit on the neighborhood stuff, but Kris can talk about some of the current initiatives that we've got going on in our neighborhood.
Yeah, and I see there's a couple great questions in the chat about these questions. Ian and I would love to talk about those. So we will do that shortly. We'll finish up. We just have a couple more program things to chat about, and then we can kind of open up the floor for questions. But yeah, as Ian said, the neighborhood is kind of that's the place where everything got started. We call it our founding neighborhood. It's also kind of like our experimenting kind of testing ground. And so we're very still loyal to that place. Our executive director, myself, we live in the neighborhood. And it's an interesting thing when you're an asset-based community development nonprofit. People often ask us what you do like in the neighborhood. And it's sometimes hard to put exact words to that, because it's a little bit like, well, we do like what our neighbors do. Like we support what our neighbors do. We're not trying to come into the neighborhood and say like, neighborhood movement thinks we should do this thing. It's a lot more of like, oh, here's a neighbor that wants to host monthly events in the park. Let's come alongside here and see how we can assist. It's a lot of just door knocking, getting to know neighbors, asking these sorts of questions you all and Ian was referring to, and connecting neighbors based off their common gifts. So it's a lot of that, and a lot of connecting. We have had some neighbors go through these programs that Ian just talked about, and I talked about before. And so we really try and sponsor some neighbors to do some cool things in the neighborhood as well. Right now, we're also dipping our hands into commercial development, just because South Broadway has some structural inequity around it, and it has for years. And so we're trying to kind of say, all right, what are some alternate businesses that might work on South Broadway? How can we get neighbors in the driver's seat of some of the development happening in the neighborhood as opposed to outsiders? And so that's a lot of what we've been doing in our associate neighborhood. And I'm happy to chat more about that as we get more into questions. But Ian, do you want to finish us off with We Care?
Sure. Yeah. So our last kind of our initiative that we think is just this excellent on-ramp for sorry, I lost y'all, for connecting with neighbors and taking those first steps is really the transformative power of gatherings that we've talked about. We've really woven this through all of our programs, but that is just this idea of, if you can get neighbors together, gathering in very simple ways. We don't talk about block parties. We talk about gatherings, because 2-3 neighbors gathering on a porch, having some coffee, that is a really powerful thing right there. But gatherings, not just they're small, but they're also intentional. And so we want gatherings where people have made intentional effort. I actually have this book on my desk here, The Art of Gathering, another excellent book. And it kind of informed a lot of this, of like, this is by Priya Parker, by the way, really great book. But as how do you gather in a way that maximizes that connection, that helps people learn about each other's gifts, and build those relationships? And so we get to train people. We started in Wichita, where we are hoping to get 80,000 people involved in these neighborly acts of some sort, and a lot of them through these block gatherings. That represents 20% of the city of Wichita, which we've heard is a number that when you get 20% of anybody to do something, of a population to do something, you're on the path to real transformative change. So we help people. We do these trainings to hold these gatherings, and we say we're the type of people who are like, okay, you want to do a gathering, like who is going to be your ally? Like let's not talk vague. Let's like name the person that you're going to go talk to about being your ally, and when are you going to host it, and are you going to put a reminder in your phone, or do you want us to give you a call at this stage? So we really try to do this this high touch kind of coaching and facilitation here to help make sure that people get these gatherings held, because once they experience the gatherings, that's where we believe people really get to see the power of neighboring. And we also recognize that a lot of times when people are just beginning to invite neighbors to a gathering, or to look for an ally to help them plan a gathering, they feel like, where do I even start? Is there a neighbor, like, who do I begin to approach? And so one piece that we found, that if we can get Wichita and Kansas, saturated with signs that just simply say we care, that simply send the message that, like, by putting this sign in my yard, I kind of commit to at least being open to hearing from my neighbor. We, that gives pretty much everybody, the goal would be these would be everywhere. And so everybody on a block, anybody on a block, can at least find one neighbor with a sign like that, and know, okay, I can start with that person. That person can be my ally. And actually, I would say, in absence of those signs, little free libraries, those types of things kind of show, like, I am public, I'm outward facing, like I'm looking to engage with neighbors. And so we help people start there. And so now we've taken this initiative to churches and organizations around the country, or around Wichita and around Kansas, and now we're training them on how to hold these gatherings. So yeah, that's a big initiative, but the gatherings have really just become a key part. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers what we do.
Wow. Love the sign idea, and have been seeing those around and being shared even on social media. But I love the fact that neighboring movement's really been at the forefront of the whole movement, right? And many of these examples are really kind of cutting edge, leading the way for us. And even when you roll out new things, I've still always been fascinated by that animator network, and the fact that you're able to get some grants and some monies to help pay people, because you're able to attract people from all demographics, or maybe some people that might not otherwise be able to participate, and paying them to be a part of that animator network. I just think that's a great model. And every time I hear you talk about it, I'm like, man, I need to find some money to do the same thing in this area. So you're certainly an example for all of us to try and emulate. Well, wait, I know we've had a few questions in chat. I want others to have time to jump in and chat and ask questions too, not just me. So I see Evelyn, you've already provided a link to questions. Someone had asked about asking the right questions. You mentioned holy questions, and you'll notice that Ian has shared that link to those questions. I see Evelyn has asked, did you encounter community apathy in your area? And if so, how did you overcome it? And how long did it take to build trust? Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah,
Great.
it is great. I can share first, Ian, and then I'd love to hear input as well. Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I'll share more from the neighborhood's perspective, because I think that maybe makes a little more sense for this context, and that's what I see more. But absolutely. I mean, I think in short, our answer has just been keep plugging away, like keep doing the thing. Because I think you're absolutely right. Like you're touching on what we always say, which is neighboring moves at the speed of trust. Like it really does just take a ton of like continuing to show up, continuing to get to know neighbors. Like that's what it's been for me. Like even when some neighbors have some like, oh, like we know that what we're doing is a countercultural thing, like going up and knocking on someone's door and being like, I'm just here to get to know you. Like they're not expecting that as a neighbor, right? And I think a lot of you you're on this call because you've had those experiences too. But as you keep showing up and people keep realizing like, oh, you're not actually here to sell me on this thing or whatever, they realize like those walls sort of come down. So But in our neighborhood, especially because we're a context that is often people see our neighborhood only for its deficiencies and only for its problems, we've tried to address it from kind of all fronts. Like, obviously, we're doing this connecting work. We're trying to get neighbors to get to know each other. We're doing events. We're trying to just continue to support neighbors and doing block parties, things that celebrate our place, like do events at the park. We're also doing some interesting stuff around um, we have a group of neighbors that I'm a part of that we put together a neighborhood newsletter that goes out once a month. And it's called Good in the Hood. And the idea was completely like all the news, all the media that comes out of our neighborhood is just the bad stuff. So even the people that live in our neighborhood, aside from people in the greater Wichita area, all they start to think about of the neighborhood is these like random crimes that they see that happen at the motels or things like that. And so we started saying like, okay, like I get that that's a part of the neighborhood, but this is not telling the full story. And so a group of neighbors and we started just writing these monthly articles where each month we seek to highlight both a neighbor, an individual that's doing cool stuff, and then an organization or a business in the neighborhood that's doing cool stuff, or an association. And so that has been, I think, a cool part. Another way that we're coming at this and trying to, even just on a narrative and story level, we're trying to address some of the like, no, there are neighbors here that actually do care about this place. And so the attitude of like, well, no one here cares, or everyone's, dealing drugs or whatever, it's just not true. So I think, yes, we've discovered that apathy and we're trying to kind of address it from all the different angles. And I think in short, it's just continuing to show up, continuing to provide that asset-based narrative. And I think people in time really start to come to see like, oh yeah, like I am starting to see my neighborhood in a different way. I'm seeing that people are still showing up and caring and doing stuff. So it's a great question. I don't think we have it all figured out either, but these are some of the experiments we've done to try and kind of address it. So
I love your use of storytelling and things. And someone has asked, do you send that out electronically, or is it a hand copy of the newsletter and the stories? How does that
That's a great question too.
appear?
So we do both. The crazy thing we do is we do hand deliver it door to door. Our neighborhood is massive, and so unfortunately, we've only done about the top quarter of the neighborhood, what we call the North Fourth. That's kind of where most of our relational efforts have been. Like that's where we know the most neighbors, have the most neighbors that are living there. That's where like I live and things like that. So and that area alone is already like 650 households or so. And so we only hand deliver to that portion right now, but anyone else in the neighborhood we send electronic copies to, we mail it to the businesses. But we have a network of neighbors that just go door to door and hand deliver them. And it's great because then we have a chance to check in with neighbors that are out. And if not, we just tape it on their, storm door or whatever. But it is a fun, like we're always out there each month, walking the neighborhood, having conversations, handing these things out. So yeah, it's a great question. And that's an awesome example of how Neighbor Movement has come alongside the project, because it's a group of neighbors that write the articles, do all of the work for it. And Neighbor Movement has sponsored it by saying like, we'll support this thing by printing it at our office because we have a big office printer. And so that's been a great way to kind of collaborate and come alongside something that neighbors are already doing. So yeah.
I have found in one of our neighborhoods, which was about that same size, I think it's more like 700 homes. We had some funds to mail a newsletter quarterly. We did that for 2 years, maybe a little more than that. And I would hear people in the park or something not know what was going on. I'd say something about it. Well, then, did you see the newsletter? And inevitably, everybody would say, "What newsletter? What are you talking about?" Well, the one that comes in the mail. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. And so we transitioned that to hand delivering and flyers, and people lots of times had person-to-person contact. That really was much better. It takes a lot more effort, but people are more likely to connect with it, read it, take a look at it. Well, I think we've had a few other questions here. I know specifically about funding. What is your funding source? Do you have commercial businesses offering financial resources? I know you guys have been very proficient at writing grants as well.
Yeah. I can just mention a brief piece because Brianne also asked about funding, and specifically around like, we know neighboring is important, but how do we communicate that to donors? And that has been an interesting thing. I think one of the pieces that we have really honed in on is that social determinants of health piece. This the way that neighboring really benefits health from a holistic sense. you know, there's the statistic of, um, y'all can help me help me out because it's been a while since it came out, about how many cigarettes a day that loneliness is a
15.
yeah, 15. I thought 14, something like that. Yeah, 15 cigarettes a day, right? Like, um, so just the idea that if you get to know the people around, like if you know the names of just a few neighbors, the transformative power that that can have on your health. Um, so things around health, safety, um, civic engagement, we often frame neighboring around the that kind of language as well. Civic engagement, those that has been really successful with funders. Um, you know, that's kind of what we've leaned into, and we've partnered with other organizations. Like for instance, our faith-based grant is we partner with the United Methodist Health Ministry Fund here in the Great Plains conference, or Great Plains Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, and so um, they're focused on that holistic vision of health, and we were able to co-write a Lilly grant with them and have good success that way. And we've gone for a much more diverse kind of portfolio of grant opportunities with our secular program, a lot of times around health and civic engagement as well. As far as commercial businesses offering financial and product resources, I think one thing that comes to mind for me, Kris, and maybe you, I mean, you would definitely know more, but is just the way that, like, one of the neighbors that Kris alluded to in our neighborhood that's holding all these block gatherings, she gets a lot of support from various various commercial businesses who've provided supplies, you know, from pizzas to art supplies um, and other things, but also associations too, like the VFW, or local churches have done a lot of cooking out and those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian's right. And it's cool because it's felt very ABCD as well, in terms of like, we have a neighborhood diner that's beloved, and we always do a breakfast as one of the kickoffs for one of these park events. And every year they donate like butter and syrup and all these like, and like flour. It's like, okay, that's your jam. Like, yeah, you can donate the pancake stuff, and that's like fitting. So it's been cool to like, we try and reach out to the businesses in the same way that we reach out to people and say like, what are your gifts? What do you have to offer? And what do you want to offer in the neighborhood? And then we try and do it in an authentic way like that. But yeah, it's been awesome to have like businesses and churches and different groups kind of come alongside the efforts as well.
Yeah.
I loved when you were talking about examples that neighbors have undertaken. You were sharing a lot of examples that some people might consider small, but you know, sharing food with a neighbor, taking a trash can back up the driveway. And you mentioned a few other things that were like small, where I think people generally hear this or go through a train, they start thinking big. Can I do a block party for 100 people, sort of thing? But you, by saying that, I think you're saying there's great wisdom and great power in starting small and having consistency over doing one big thing. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. Neighboring to me just feels like it's a, I don't know. It's just it's a consistent practice of all the little things that just make life so much more better, much more joyful. You know, it's like, and I think that's what is so great about this, is like, it's so accessible. And even if you haven't started getting to know your neighbors, or you feel like, oh, I think people often go to the like, oh, I have to throw this big block party, whatever. And it's like, okay, like that would be awesome down the road, but like, it can just start with a wave. It can just start with, just dropping off Christmas cookies, and that starts a conversation, right? So it's just, yeah, it's all those little things that, to everyone's point that's brought it up thus far, that just slowly builds trust. And as you keep doing that, of like, every time I see this person, I say hi, I'm delivering Christmas cookies, like, to just keep showing up, that shows that neighbor that like you care, and like you're in it for the long haul, and you're in it. So yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And if I could just add one little piece to that, that kind of ties back to that question about um, community apathy and building trust. I think Kris really hit the nail on the head when you said that it's really just this collection of little things. You know, I think we often find, like, on the idea level, I mean, we hear this story all the time. I used to, or my grandma used to, or we used to leave our door unlocked and any neighbor could come over at any time for a cup of sugar, right? Like, I mean, how many times have we heard that story before? It's in the collective memory. People are longing for it, but they get to this sense like it is it's a bygone era. And so having that ability to like start small um, can help people see that actually it's really not. It's we love the idea of habit stacking, this idea of like doing things like adding one little layer to something that you already do, like finding what is authentic for you. So maybe for some people, for you, it might be um, like some people it's baking, like baking cookies, right? But some people, the reverse Midas touch, you burn every cookie that you've ever put in the oven. So that's not, if someone says like, baking is how you meet your neighbors and that's not authentic to you, then you're going to be like, well, I guess I'm never neighboring. But if for you, like a handwritten card is something that you love to do, you can just do what you already love to do and then bring in neighbors in small ways, right? And we talk about building community presence is this big part of it. So when I moved here, I just spent like more than a year and a half really before I did anything in my neighborhood, just walking my dog just all the time, varying my times up a little bit, trying to practice consistency though, just making my face before I talk to anyone, just making my face familiar to people. And then when I do start going up to talk to someone, it's not this like, who are you? It's like, oh, you're that guy I see all the time. Okay. And they're a little bit, they can put their guard down a little bit. And so those are the small things. But also I do want to say that like I mean we believe that neighboring can change the world. Like I mean, so it can be small, but it can be huge too. And even the big things um, start with these little small things. I mean, I
Mm.
have this real passion for kind of international neighboring movements at scale. Like, what is the dream world that we could build with neighboring? And there's a couple of places in India and North and East Syria where people have built radically transformative movements through neighbors and I will say like neighboring is one of the key forces that defeated the Islamic State in Syria. Actually, that's a bold claim, but I'll make it. But it was 30 plus years of organizing to get there, of just these small, people going and having a cup of tea with their neighbors, doing the same kind of stuff that we do here. And then that built the capacity in this social fabric that made it in a little corner of Syria impossible for, um, the Islamic State to have the grip, because people had a strong safety net of people relationships they could lean into to kind of resist. That's a simplified message, but I mean, from uh, literally having a porch gathering with a few neighbors to um, resisting the worst form of oppression, neighboring has just real transformative power.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great examples. Well, we may have to enter into the lightning round now because it looks like we have several questions that have popped up here. And uh, do people do gathering at their house or a mutual location? What do you see most commonly? What do you encourage?
It's a little bit of both. We try and talk about the importance of third spaces, so places that aren't your home or work, in neighborhoods. And so for us, like in the Soci neighborhood, we have Lincoln Park. It's a great outdoor space. We don't have a ton of indoor spaces, and that's been one of the things that we're actually working on with this property development. Is saying like, yeah, what about a coffee shop? What about some sort of community spot where neighbors, because there's all these awesome associations, there's all these awesome porch, gatherings that are happening. But are there maybe some spaces where we can do that in the colder months and the warmer months, when it's really harder to be outside? So it's kind of a mix. We often tell people like, just go knock on doors first, have a little porch thing. Outside is nice because visually people feel safer. They can kind of feel like they can come and go a bit easier. It can feel overwhelming if it's like, oh, I gotta go be in someone's house immediately off the bat, right? So we don't always suggest that, but through relationship, we find that often happens. Neighbors want to offer hospitality, have people over for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. So it's a little bit of a blend, but definitely take advantage of those like the third spaces in your neighborhood where it's just kind of free to hang out or be, or at least low barrier of entry, places like coffee shops. So
Kris, that answer may lead into the second question from Stan, who asked, do you have a specific example of buying and developing a vacant property? Because
Oh
you
man.
made mention of project that's going on.
Yeah, there's so many stories, and there's so, I mean, we're experimenting, so it's early stages. I don't know, and I think it's so context specific. One of my favorites is that we have a neighborhood garden in the neighborhood, and that was an abandoned lot that a cell tower company bought to put a cell tower on. But then, in credit to them, they were very forward thinking. They said instead of like paying a group to do landscaping and take care, continue to come out and mow and all of that, they said, I wonder if like a neighborhood garden would make sense here. And so they actually approached the neighboring movement and the neighborhood association about this. And we said, well, I don't know, like we're not going to do that. We're going to ask our neighbors if they want that. And so we went out and we just started canvassing and like as neighbors just knocking on doors all around the area and saying like, if this happened, like, would you want a neighborhood garden? What would you want? And people loved it. And so they basically, the cell tower company wrote the neighborhood association a check to fund like the first 5 years of water for this neighborhood garden. So that neighbors could basically come and adopt a plot and then just have like all they had to do was the weeding and the care and the water was all paid for, right? So that was a really cool one that was kind of in partnership with business. And we're doing a lot just as neighboring movement now with just buying abandoned properties, trying to fix them up and then hold them for neighbors to do things. So like I'm opening a coffee shop in the neighborhood next year because that's always what I've wanted to do. And again, I'm talking about like these third spaces, and I see just in my years of living in the neighborhood, just the amount of conversations I've had with neighbors that say like, we just don't have a safe, fun place to hang out on South Broadway. And for me, that's a coffee shop. And so I'm like, oh, this is what it might not work, but I'm going to attempt it. So there's a lot of different examples of how it's happening. I would say the nonprofit has an ability, and actually what's happened is the nonprofit has formed an LLC that is managing these properties in the neighborhood. So there's some unique stuff you can kind of get creative with as an organization, and it gives you some perks as opposed to just like an informal group of neighbors. But yeah, we're just trying to kind of hold spaces for neighborhood neighbors. So yeah, I hope that it's complex and we're still learning. But yeah, in short, there's a couple examples.
There's different complexities from community to community even. And Evelyn asked a question that is probably relevant to her context, what she's seen maybe. It may not exist everywhere. Does Wichita place abandoned properties in a land bank and sell them at really discounted rates to nonprofit organizations? That occurs somewhere, some places, but is that a thing in Wichita?
Not that I know of. We've looked into it. We've looked into like starting a community development corporation, things like that. There's not really much prevalence of that here, unfortunately, yet. And so we weren't able to do something like that. Do you know any more, Ian, that I don't know?
No, I don't. I'd love to hear more about that model. I don't think that there's anything like that in Wichita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons why the nonprofit is kind of trying to step into this role and say, like, all right, no one else is going to do it in the neighborhood. Or if they do, it might be outside developers that might not have the best interest of neighbors. And so it's been an interesting, like, it feels like a lot of responsibility, but we're attempting to take it on and say, like, let's just put neighbors in the driver's seat of this thing. So,
yeah. I know in Springfield, there's a organization called SGF, Restore SGF, I'm sorry. And they're doing a lot to cover all the first time home buyer costs to get people into abandoned or what had been maybe rental properties to get them into home ownership, to change a neighborhood in that way with more home ownership as opposed to rentals. Well, in Wichita, the city does have a program there through the code enforcement where they work with volunteer organizations to help fix up damaged properties or things that might be a code violation at least once, maybe twice sometimes, to help them move beyond some of that. So there's different models around, but the land bank is a big one that some communities have been able to pull off. Mary says here, I tell the story about how a waving ritual my mother and I had with her neighbor literally saved her life. Long story short, the neighbor was a solo ager and had met my mother at church. She trusted her with a key in case of emergencies. And I'm guessing that probably came into play. We could read that into chat by having that access to a neighbor who literally needed help, right? Your neighbors lots of times are your first responders, whether it's something that requires an EMT, like her message here, or you've fallen off a ladder or something. So that's another strong reason, strong health reason to make those connections with your neighbors.
Yeah, and Ian kind of touched on that with the like, sometimes we joke about how neighboring can look a little bit like kind of like in a weird way, it almost can feel a little creepy or like stalking or something. Cause you really, like Ian said, people always think about the like, we're always putting stuff up on boards and then making connections. And it does feel a little bit like, oh, this is what happens in crime shows or something. But to that point, like we try and tell people like, yeah, do pay attention to your neighbors, like routines and rituals and things like that. Because absolutely, I've had so many examples of like, yeah, elderly neighbors that like neighbors go check in on them because they're like, oh, I haven't seen them do this one thing that they normally do. And it's like, oh, they fell or they, passed out. And so, yeah, it can be really scary and really dangerous. And that's why, yeah, we're like, absolutely. This is such, I mean, there's some clear and obvious, we all know about the effects of isolation and loneliness, and that can feel a little more like ambiguous. But then there's some very obvious ones like this, where it's like, yeah, like literally checking in on your neighbors can prevent those sorts of things. So I love that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody that's gathered on this call, certainly a believer in the idea of neighboring and making these connections and its value.
Absolutely.
What do you guys see? What's the future going forward? Whether it's for the neighboring movement or where do you see the impact areas that we can make impact, or where do you see this kind of movement heading? You think we're small incremental amounts of change over a long period of time can have a big impact? So maybe we're still in that mode. Are we at that 20% mark yet, the tipping point? Where do you kind of see the movement going? And I guess what's in the future for the neighboring movement as well?
We're not at that tipping point yet. I think what I am really passionate about is the idea of the places where I've seen neighboring have the largest impact, abroad as models that I've kind of looked for. What they have that we don't have is this kind of culture, this communal kind of where my well-being is intertwined with your well-being, kind of this kind of mindset, right? This culture of neighborly interdependence. And so I see the real power of block by block moving from these hyper individualistic cultures to these this culture of neighboring on block levels, and those blocks linking up with one another, talking with each other, from block to block, and then on the organizational level. I mean, I just like Neighborhoods USA for some of y'all that are representing that and other organizations. Like I see that is something that is really exciting. All of the connecting that's happening between neighboring organizations. Megan's here from Community Works with the community building hub. Like want to rep that as well. Just that space to kind of share, and yeah, I just see there's so much potential for also networking with other similar movements like cooperatives. We're working on a grocery co-op here in our neighborhood, but there's worker-owned cooperatives, and there's movements for like the solidarity economy movement. Like some of those movements I don't always see in conversation with neighboring and ABCD movements, but like to me the connections are obvious. And I think community building hub and places like that are places to continue to have those conversations. That's what I think. Kris, would you add anything there?
Oh, absolutely. I would just say, like, I think even just where we're at in the world right now, like in terms of our current political situation and how divided people feel like we are, is providing an interesting opportunity where, like, I think even more than ever, folks are starting to realize, like, oh man, this system that we have, it doesn't really work for us, or it's making us feel more divided. And so I think more and more people are coming to realization of like, we have to be involved in authentic community, number one, because things like, our technology, our social media, things like that aren't giving us the same sense of like satisfaction that we have when we actually sit down and have a cup of coffee or tea with a neighbor, right? So I think there's that side of it. I also think people are realizing like actually what happens at the most local level is what actually impacts me the most and brings me the most kind of joy. And so I think we, in the midst of getting these sorts of questions, or in the midst of talking with like my neighbors and friends of mine who feel so like, I don't know, hopeless sometimes about the state of the world, that for, I know Ian and I have had lots of conversations about this. We just always lean back on that. Like, man, when we get discouraged, we're just like, my answer is always to lean into those like relationships and the neighbor things right around me. Cause it's like, if we can just practice at the smallest scale what we believe about the world, I think that's going to make the most impact. And eventually that'll just scale up over time. So, yeah. So I don't know. It's a tough, yeah, I think we're in an exciting place because I think people are coming to that realization. And if we just keep practicing and providing examples of another way of being, I think people will catch that fire. So,
yeah, improve the spot that you're in, right? Improve the neighborhood that you're in, and we can all do that. And someone mentioned the podcast here. Certainly, the Neighboring Movement podcast are great to listen to and a great source of information. As we just right before we wrap up, quick fire. Any favorite neighboring books that you're currently reading that you would recommend to us?
Chris, you got any?
Oh, well, Ian mentioned the Connected Community. That's like our go-to. I mean, we literally, yeah, if anyone hasn't read the Connected Community yet, the last big thing that John McKnight and Cormac Russell collaborated on, it's become kind of our foundation to recommend to everybody. So that's a good run. The Art of Neighboring is a classic, older one. That's kind of what helped start the nonprofit in many ways. John Pathak and Dave Runyon. So that's a classic one. I'm sure many of you have heard about that. And then to get more and like a little more like theory with it, Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown is a favorite one of the organization. And that's a great one I would recommend. A little more kind of gets asset-based community development. And then finally, I would recommend in terms of Ian and I always talk about movies and media. I'm obsessed with the musical In the Heights. And I think it's an amazing example of awesome neighboring and like place-based neighboring. So if you're into like alternate, not just books, I would recommend the musical In the Heights. And also there's a movie made off of it too. So yeah.
Well, if you're in the Springfield area for Missouri Good Neighbor Week, we'll be hosting 2 movie screenings at the Moxie. We'll be kicking off the week with the documentary Leap of Faith. That is not the Leap of Faith movie with Steve Martin in it. That is the a more recent documentary called Leap of Faith, getting 12 different ministry leaders together over a long period of time. And then we'll be ending the week on October 5th with a screening of A Man Named Otto, which is an excellent movie about neighboring and loneliness and connections. So just a reminder that National Good Neighbor Day is on September 28th. That is your easy, convenient excuse to do something for and with your neighbors. And if you're in Missouri, we'll celebrate all week long. Missouri Good Neighbor Week, September 28th to October 4th. All right. Well, we sure appreciate Ian and Kris giving of their time to be on here today and to share with us, and keep the good work going, gentlemen. And for everybody that's on here, we'll meet again next month, same day of the week, third Thursday, same time, 12 noon, and we'll be hearing from Nicole, who I think was on here earlier, from Boise, Idaho, and a unique project out in Boise. So I'll end the recording, but thank you all for being on here. You're welcome to stay on and visit some if you'd like to.
Thank you all for having us. We're really honored to be with such cool people. So thanks for being here.
This was amazing. Thank you so much, David.
Thank
You bet.
you.